The gate agent looked at my passport, looked at her screen, and then looked at me like she wished someone else had to say it. Miss Monroe, your reservation was cancelled yesterday afternoon. Behind the glass wall of the first-class boarding lane, my mother adjusted her pearl earrings and pretended not to hear. My sister lifted her champagne flute from the airline lounge and smiled. That was the moment I understood they had not forgotten me. They had planned it. My name is Jenna Monroe. I was 31 years old, living in Charlotte, North Carolina, and working as a contracts coordinator for a regional hospitality supplier. I spent my days reading fine print for resort vendors, transportation agreements, catering clauses, and cancellation penalties. My family thought that made me boring. They said I was good with paperwork because I had no life, no husband, and no real pressure. They were wrong about the pressure. I had simply learned not to bleed where they could see it. We were supposed to be flying to the Bahamas for my younger sister Tessa's wedding at an oceanfront resort called the Mariner's Crown. My parents had talked about that wedding for 10 months like it was a royal coronation. Tessa was marrying Preston Vale, the son of a private equity man with a jawline like a golf club and manners polished enough to fool people who did not listen closely. I had taken 4 vacation days, bought a bridesmaid dress I could barely afford, and packed 3 garment bags, my sister said, were too important to trust to staff. At first, I thought the cancellation was a system mistake. I gave the agent the confirmation number from the family itinerary my father had emailed 2 weeks earlier. She typed again, frowned harder, and said the words carefully. The ticket was voided by the purchaser. The credit was applied to another passenger's upgrade. She did not say my family. She did not need to. I looked past her shoulder and saw my father, Wade Monroe, step into the priority lane with a leather duffel I had bought him for Father's Day. My mother, Diane, finally glanced back, not with guilt, with irritation, like my confusion was embarrassing her. She mouthed, "Don't start." Tessa stood beside her in a white travel suit tan, already perfect hair curled like she was walking into a bridal magazine shoot. When our eyes met, she gave a tiny shrug, almost playful. Then she turned to Preston's mother and said something that made the woman laugh. I was standing 20 feet away holding Tessa's veil box, and they were already treating me like lost luggage. I asked the gate agent if there was any seat left on the flight. She said there was one business-class seat available at a walk-up fare that made my stomach turn cold. I had $800 in checking after paying rent, utilities, and the balance on Tessa's dress alterations because she had cried that the seamstress was ruining her week. My credit card was close to maxed. My parents knew that. They knew exactly what I could and could not fix at an airport counter with 40 minutes before departure. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was a text from my mother. Not a call, not an apology. Just a text that said, "Jenna, please don't embarrass us. Take a later flight if you can. Tessa cannot handle drama today." Under it, my sister sent a second message. "You weren't really needed for the welcome dinner anyway. Bring the veil tomorrow if you make it. If you make it." 4 words can be a knife when they come from someone who has spent her whole life being handed the handle. The pattern had started so early that nobody in our house called it a pattern. When Tessa broke something, I had left it too close to the edge. When Tessa forgot something, I should have reminded her. When Tessa cried, the room rearranged itself around her. I was not the unwanted child in some dramatic movie of the week way. They fed me, dressed me, came to school concerts, but love in our house had tears, and I had always been seated where the service door swung open. My father's favorite phrase was, "Be reasonable, Jenna." He used it whenever he wanted me to swallow something unfair without chewing. Be reasonable when Tessa got the car I had worked summers to help pay for. Be reasonable when my college fund got borrowed for her pageant coaching and never replaced. Be reasonable when I was asked to move out of my childhood bedroom for Tessa's bridal storage because you don't live here anymore anyway. Reasonable in our family meant quiet enough for them to keep benefiting. I stood there in Terminal B with the veil box under one arm and my carry-on handle cutting into my palm watching them board. My father did look back once. I thought maybe he would step out of line, maybe he would say there had been confusion, maybe some buried part of him would remember teaching me to ride a bike in the church parking lot. Instead, he raised his hand, not quite a wave, more like a command to stay calm. Then, he disappeared down the jet bridge. The gate door closed with a soft mechanical click. It was not loud. That almost made it worse. Betrayal should sound like shattering glass, not a polite airport latch. I stood there, after everyone else had gone, still holding the veil that my sister claimed was handmade in Italy. The agent lowered her voice, and asked if I wanted her to check other routes. I nodded because pride is strange. It can stand upright, even when the rest of you has gone numb. There were flights technically. Charlotte to Miami, Miami to Nassau, Nassau to a smaller island, then a ferry that stopped running before sunset. Another route required an overnight layover and cost more than my monthly rent. The agent kept trying because she was kind, but kindness does not create empty seats. I thanked her after the third option failed. My voice sounded professional, like I was handling someone else's vendor problem. That was my talent. I could keep my tone steady while something inside me quietly folded. I dragged my suitcase to a row of gray seats near a charging station and set Tessa's veil box beside me. My bridesmaid dress was in the garment bag across my lap, pale blue satin that made me look washed out because Tessa had chosen the shade after holding it against my face and saying, "Perfect, it won't compete." I should have been angry enough to throw the veil into a trash can. Instead, I sat there, smoothing the corner of the box like an idiot. That is the part people misunderstand about humiliation. It does not always make you fierce right away. Sometimes it makes you careful. Sometimes it makes you check your own memory, your own tone, your own worth. I scrolled through the family group chat and saw photos from the lounge. My mother had posted one of Tessa holding a mimosa with the caption, "Wedding weekend begins, our whole family is off to paradise." Our whole family. My hand started shaking so hard I locked the screen. I almost called my best friend Mara, but I stopped with my thumb over her name. Mara had warned me not to let them turn me into unpaid wedding staff. She had said, "Jenna, they are going to use you until you are empty and then blame you for the sound it makes." I had defended them, because that is what trained daughters do. We call neglect stress. We call cruelty tradition. We call favoritism family dynamics, because the real words would force us to act. A man sitting 2 seats away cleared his throat. He was in his late 40s, maybe early 50s, wearing a navy jacket with no tie and reading glasses pushed up into dark silver hair. I had noticed him only because he had helped an elderly woman lift her bag into the overhead bin area earlier, then stepped back without making a performance of it. Now he was looking at the veil box, then at the garment bag, then at my face with a kind of restrained concern that did not feel intrusive. "Rough morning?" he asked. I laughed once, but no humor came out. My family canceled my ticket and boarded without me. He did not react dramatically. He did not gasp or ask if I was sure. He just removed his glasses slowly, like he had learned that some sentences deserved room. "To wear the mariner's crown," I said. "My sister's wedding." Something changed in his expression. Not shock exactly. Recognition. He looked toward the dark window where the plane had just pushed back from the gate, then back at me. "The mariner's crown, on St. Aurelia." I nodded, too tired to wonder why he knew the full name of the island. "Yes. Apparently I'm optional until someone needs me to carry a veil." He glanced at the box again. "What's your sister's name?" "Tessa Monroe," I said. "Soon to be Tessa Vale if the ocean doesn't develop standards before Saturday." That made his mouth twitch, but his eyes stayed sharp. "And Preston Vale is the groom." I turned toward him fully for the first time. "You know them?" "In a way," he said. Then he slipped a phone from his jacket pocket and stood. "My name is Graham Harlow. I own the Mariner's Crown." For a second I thought I had misheard him. The airport noise pulled back around me, muffled and strange. Graham Harlow was a name I had seen in trade articles, vendor contracts, and hospitality acquisition news. Harlow Properties owned boutique resorts across the Caribbean and the Southeast. My company had bid on one of his supplier packages 2 years earlier and lost. My family had spent months bragging that Tessa's wedding was at an exclusive resort where connections mattered. Apparently, connections did matter, just not the ones they thought. I stood because sitting suddenly felt impossible. "I'm sorry, did you say you own the resort?" "I did." He studied me for a moment, not unkindly. "And if your family left you here while flying to an event on my property carrying wedding items they expected you to deliver? I think we should have a conversation before I get on my next plane." I looked down at the veil box, at my cheap carry-on, at the bridesmaid dress across my arm. My first instinct was still to protect them. That shame ran deep. I almost said it was a misunderstanding. I almost said they were stressed. I almost used the same soft lies that had kept me available for years. But then my phone lit up again with a message from Tessa. "Seriously, don't make this about you. Preston's family hates scenes. I showed Graham the screen without saying anything. His jaw tightened just slightly. Do you have identification? He asked. Yes. Good. Do you have your passport? In my bag. Good, he said again. My aircraft is wheels up in 55 minutes from the private terminal. I stared at him. Mr. Harlow, I can't afford. I didn't ask you to afford it. His voice was calm, but there was steel underneath it. I asked if you wanted to arrive. That was the first moment the day shifted. Not fixed, not healed, shifted. Because for the first time in my life, someone with power had seen exactly what my family did and had not asked me to make it smaller for their comfort. My throat tightened so sharply I had to look away. Outside the window, the plane carrying my parents, my sister, and their polished little story lifted into the sky without me. And for once, being left behind was not the end of the story. Graham Harlow did not sweep me away like a movie hero. That would have been easier to dismiss later as luck, fantasy, or some ridiculous rescue I had not earned. Instead, he walked me through the airport like a man who understood procedures. He called someone named Elise, gave her my legal name, confirmed my passport, and asked her to contact St. Aurelia Immigration with a passenger update. Then he looked at me and said, "Before we go anywhere, you need to decide what you want delivered and what you want returned." I knew he meant the veil box. It sat between us in the back of the airport cart, white ribbon, still perfect, my sister's name printed on a gold tag. For 10 months that wedding had swallowed my evenings. I had picked up invitations, corrected menu cards, argued with a florist when Tessa changed her mind for the 6th time, and covered deposits my mother called temporary. I had told myself helping was cheaper than fighting. Looking at that box, I realized obedience had become my family's favorite currency. I don't want to ruin her wedding, I said, because some reflexes survive even when dignity does not. Graham did not argue. That is not what I asked. His answer landed cleanly. I looked down at my hands. My nails were bare because Tessa said bridesmaids should not draw attention. My ring finger had a small paper cut from folding welcome letters the night before. I thought of my mother's text, my father's almost wave, Tessa's little shrug. Then I thought of the way the gate door had closed, soft and final. I want to arrive, I said, and I want them to explain why I was disposable. The private terminal was quiet in a way that made my humiliation louder. No crowded boarding lanes, no plastic seats, no families dragging strollers and neck pillows. Just polished floors, low voices, a coffee bar, and a woman in a charcoal blazer who greeted Graham by name. I felt absurd standing there with a clearance bin carry-on and a bridesmaid dress in a wrinkled garment bag. Graham must have noticed, because he handed my luggage to the attendant without comment. As if I belonged there enough that nobody needed to announce it. On the jet, I sat by the window and watched a lineman load my suitcase into the hold. Graham took the seat across from me, opened a leather folder, and did something I did not expect. He worked, he reviewed emails, signed 2 documents, and left me alone with my breathing. That silence was kinder than questions. People think comfort is always a hand on your shoulder. Sometimes comfort is someone powerful, not demanding your wound perform for them before they decide whether it is real. Halfway over the Atlantic, Graham asked, "Did your family put you in charge of any wedding communications with my resort?" I hesitated. Unofficially. That word usually costs someone. I almost smiled. Tessa hates email. My mother says contracts give her migraines. So I reviewed the transportation schedule, the vendor arrival windows, the welcome dinner seating, the room block, the hair and makeup invoices. I didn't negotiate anything. I just made sure no one missed deadlines. "And did they tell the resort you were the family contact?" "I think so," I swallowed. "Maybe." I got copied on a few emails. He reached into his folder and pulled out a printed page. "Your name is listed as the authorized on-site family coordinator for the Monroe Vale wedding weekend." I stared at the paper. There it was. Jenna Monroe, not bridesmaid, not sister of the bride. Authorized on-site family coordinator. Beside my name was my phone number and email address. The signature line belonged to my mother. My stomach tightened, but not from surprise. Surprise requires a part of you to believe people have limits. Mine had been training me out of that belief for years. "I didn't sign that," I said. "I did not think you had." Graham slid the page closer. "This gives you authority to approve changes up to $5,000 per incident during the event. It also makes you responsible for resolving family-caused delays with vendors." That is not a ceremonial role. My face went hot. Not because I had done something wrong, but because they had counted on my shame to keep me quiet if something went wrong. They had cancelled my ticket, boarded without me, and still left my name attached to the labor. They wanted my hands on every problem, and my body absent from every photograph. It was so cleanly cruel that for a moment I could only look out the window at the blue water below us. Graham's voice stayed even. I am going to have my legal office freeze any discretionary approvals under your name until we confirm consent. Thank you, I whispered. You should also know something else. He turned another page. Your room was cancelled this morning at 6:12 a.m. The cabin seemed to tilt. Staff. Not even another guest room. Not even a sofa in my parents' suite. Staff. I thought about my mother telling me not to embarrass them. I thought about Tessa saying I was not really needed for the welcome dinner. They had not just left me at the airport. They had rearranged the destination so that if I somehow reached it, I would arrive already lowered. That was when I finally cried. Quietly, angrily, with my face turned toward the window because I did not want to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing how well the knife had gone in. Graham did not hand me a speech about strength. He gave me a linen napkin and said, "No one who treats you like labor gets to decide whether you are family." We landed on St. Aurelia just before sunset. The island looked unreal from above, all turquoise shallows and green hills dropping into white sand. I should have been excited. I had never flown private before. I had never been to a destination wedding at a resort where guests were met with chilled towels and hibiscus drinks. But grief travels with you. It does not care how blue the water is. It sat beside me in the car from the airstrip, wearing my mother's perfume and my sister's smile. The mariner's crown rose from the coastline like something built for people who never checked their bank balances. White stone terraces, arched balconies, palms lit from below the sea, flashing gold behind it. Staff lined the entrance as Graham stepped out. I tried to step aside, but he gestured for me to walk with him, not behind him, with him. That small adjustment nearly undid me again. I had spent so many years trailing my family with bags in my hands that walking beside someone felt almost dangerous. At the front desk, the manager greeted him, and then looked at me with professional warmth. "Miss Monroe, welcome to the Mariner's Crown. We've prepared the Seabright suite for you." I blinked. There must be a mistake. "No mistake," Graham said. "The Seabright suite is available, and you are no longer attached to the Monroeville room block." The manager handed me a key card in a small cream envelope. My name was printed on it, not Tessa's assistant, not family coordinator, not late arrival, Jenna Monroe. I held that envelope like it weighed more than my suitcase because sometimes recognition is not grand. Sometimes it is just a name printed correctly by a stranger. We had barely crossed the lobby when my phone began vibrating. First my mother, then Tessa, then my father, then Tessa again. I did not answer. I already knew what had happened. Someone had seen me arrive. Maybe a bellman had carried my garment bag. Maybe one of Preston's cousins had spotted Graham greeting me at the entrance. Maybe my family had simply learned that the person they abandoned had reached the island before cocktail hour and had not crawled in through the service hall like they planned. The first text came from my mother. "Where are you?" Then another. "Jenna, answer me right now." My father followed with, "We need to discuss what you're telling people." Tessa's message came last, sharp and bright with panic. "Why is Mr. Harlow's staff saying you're in an owner suite? What did you do?" I read that line 3 times. What did you do? Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "We are sorry." The crime in their eyes was not leaving me behind. It was arriving differently than expected. Graham saw my face and asked, "Do you want me present when you speak to them?" "No," I said. Then I surprised myself by adding, "Not yet." He nodded once. "Then Elise will escort you to your suite. Dinner begins at 7:30 on the East Terrace. You may attend, skip it, or leave the island tomorrow. No decision needs to be made for anyone else's comfort." No decision needs to be made for anyone else's comfort. I carried that sentence with me all the way up in the elevator. The suite doors opened into a room larger than my apartment, with white curtains moving in the sea breeze and a balcony facing the water. My bridesmaid dress hung in the closet beside a robe softer than anything I owned. On the table sat a welcome basket addressed only to me. I sat on the edge of the bed and laughed once because the alternative was breaking apart. I showered, changed into a simple navy dress I had packed for the rehearsal dinner, and left the pale blue bridesmaid gown in the closet. It looked like a costume now, one designed for a woman who knew her place. I pinned my hair back, covered the redness under my eyes, and put Tessa's veil box on the desk. I did not damage it. I did not hide it. I did not throw it from the balcony into the sea, though I would be lying if I said the thought lacked poetry. At 7:30, I walked onto the East Terrace. The rehearsal dinner glittered under string lights. Preston's family occupied the center tables in linen and gold. My parents stood near the bar, speaking with the practiced charm of people who had never been held accountable in public. Tessa was laughing too loudly at something Preston said. Then she saw me. The laugh stopped. My mother followed her gaze, and for one perfect second, the mask slipped off her face completely. I saw anger first. Not relief. Not shame. Anger. My father's jaw tightened. Tessa's eyes darted to my dress, then behind me as if checking whether Graham had escorted me in like proof she could not control. I walked toward them slowly, feeling every eye begin to turn. The ocean moved behind us, dark and steady. My sister recovered first because Tessa had always been gifted at turning injury into inconvenience. "There you are," she said through her teeth, smiling for the guests. "You caused a lot of confusion." I set the veil box gently on the nearest cocktail table. "No, Tessa," I said quietly. "I think the confusion started when my ticket was cancelled and my room was changed to staff housing." My mother inhaled sharply. My father stepped closer. "Lower your voice," he said. I looked at him, really looked at him, and the little girl in me waited for fear to rise. It did, but something else rose with it. Something colder. "I am speaking at the same volume you used when you left me at the gate." Preston appeared beside Tessa, his smile polished but strained. "Jenna, this is a family matter. Maybe we can take it somewhere private." Before I could answer, a resort employee approached with a tablet. "Miss Monroe, apologies for interrupting. We need your approval for the additional champagne tower and late-night cigar lounge. The family coordinator authorization is still under your name, but the owner's office has placed a consent hold." The terrace went quiet in pieces. First my mother, then Tessa, then Preston, whose face shifted as he understood that a private administrative lie had just walked into the light wearing a name tag. The employee looked confused, not cruel, simply doing his job, but his words landed harder than any accusation I could have made. I turned to my family. "You put my name on the financial approvals?" My mother's smile trembled. "It was just for convenience." "You cancelled my ticket," I said. "You cancelled my room. But you kept my name on the liability." Tessa snapped, forgetting the guests for half a second. "Oh my God, Jenna, don't be dramatic. You're good at paperwork. That was your contribution." There it was, the anchor sentence. That was your contribution. Not sister. Not bridesmaid. Not daughter. Contribution. I looked at the veil box between us, at the ribbon I had protected through an airport abandonment and a private flight they never imagined I could access. Then I looked at my sister, glowing in white, furious that the help had arrived upright. "I understand," I said. My father relaxed slightly, mistaking my calm for surrender. He had made that mistake my whole life. Then Graham Harlow stepped onto the terrace behind me, and every conversation around us died. Graham did not raise his voice when he stepped onto the terrace. He did not need to. People like my parents understood volume, but people like Preston's family understood ownership. The resort staff straightened almost imperceptibly. Preston's father lowered his drink. My mother's face went pale beneath her bronzer. Tessa looked from Graham to me with the expression she used when a store clerk refused to bend a policy for her: confusion, insult, and disbelief, all fighting for the same space. "Mr. Harlow," Preston said quickly, stepping forward with that smooth country club confidence. "We didn't realize you were joining us tonight." "I wasn't planning to," Graham said. "Then I learned one of your authorized family representatives arrived after her ticket was cancelled by the same family using her name for event approvals." The sentence moved across the terrace like a cold draft. Nobody gasped. Nobody needed to. The guests simply became still in that expensive way, the kind of silence people use when they do not want to miss a scandal but also do not want to look hungry for it. My father recovered first. He always did when there was an audience. "There's been a misunderstanding," he said, putting on the warm, reasonable tone he used with pastors and bank managers. "Jenna is emotional. Weddings are stressful. We had a complicated travel arrangement and she tends to take things personally." I looked at him and almost admired how easily he could make abandonment sound like a seating chart error. For years that tone had made me doubt myself. It wrapped cruelty in cotton. It made anyone who pushed back sound unstable. But this time I had the gate agent's words still fresh in my ears, the airline cancellation on my phone, the resort room note in Graham's folder. My father's voice no longer felt like truth. It felt like weather. Graham turned to me. Do you want to answer that? That question mattered more than he knew. Not should I handle it, not let me speak for you. Do you want to answer? I looked at my parents, then at Tessa, who was gripping Preston's arm like I had somehow stolen her groom by refusing to disappear. I did not raise my voice. My ticket was voided yesterday afternoon. The credit was applied to another passenger's upgrade. My room was cancelled this morning. The note said I would stay with staff if I arrived late. A woman at Preston's family table whispered, "Oh my God," under her breath. Tessa heard it and flushed red. My mother stepped closer to me, smiling hard enough to look painful. "Jenna, this is not the place. You're making your sister's wedding about yourself." There was that phrase again, the old family spell. About yourself. It had been used when I cried at my high school graduation because Tessa announced she had gotten into a private arts program, and my parents left my dinner early. It had been used when I asked for repayment on the college money they borrowed. It had been used every time I pointed to a wound, and they accused me of enjoying the blood. "I didn't cancel my own ticket," I said. "I didn't remove myself from the room block. I didn't put my name on a financial authorization I never signed." My mother's eyes snapped toward Graham's folder, and that tiny movement told me everything. She knew exactly what he had. She had not forgotten. She had gambled that I would never be in the right room with the right person, and enough courage to say the whole thing out loud. Preston's father, Charles Vale, cleared his throat. He was a broad man, with silver hair, and the calm entitlement of someone used to contracts bending around him. "Mr. Harlow, surely we can resolve this without disturbing the event. The wedding represents a significant investment for both families." Graham's expression did not change. "Then both families should be especially careful about consent, liability, and guest treatment on my property." That was the first time I saw Preston look truly uneasy. Not ashamed. Uneasy. Men like Preston did not fear pain they caused other people. They feared paperwork. They feared reputation. They feared a vendor dispute becoming a story told over drinks by people wealthier than them. He leaned toward Tessa and murmured something I could not hear. She yanked her arm away and glared at me as if I had planted the forms myself. The resort employee still stood beside us with the tablet, looking like he would rather sink into the terrace stones. I took pity on him. "I do not approve the champagne tower or cigar lounge," I said, "and I am not accepting responsibility for any charges under my name." He nodded quickly. "Understood, Miss Monroe. The consent hold remains." My father's face hardened. "Jenna." I knew that tone. It was the voice that had once made me apologize for Tessa stealing my winter coat, because she said it matched her boots. It was the voice that told me family peace was worth more than my discomfort, my money, my time, my plans. But the sound did not land the same way anymore. Maybe because we were standing on an island he did not control. Maybe because Graham was behind me. Maybe because I was finally tired enough to stop confusing obedience with love. "I'm going to my room," I said. Tessa's eyes flew to the veil box. "Not with that." I picked it up before she could touch it. "This is going with me until someone explains why I was expected to deliver it after being left behind." "You can't hold my veil hostage," she hissed. I looked at the white ribbon, then at her perfect bridal smile cracking at the edges. "I carried it through an airport after you told me I wasn't needed. I protected it better than you protected me." For once Tessa had no instant answer. That silence satisfied me more than shouting would have. I turned and walked off the terrace with the veil box under my arm, not fast, not dramatic, not fleeing. I walked like someone leaving a meeting that had finally revealed all the relevant facts. Behind me I heard my mother say my name twice. I did not stop. In the elevator, my hands began to shake. Strength has a delayed cost. People see you stand straight in public and assume you are made of steel, but sometimes steel is just grief that has not found a private room yet. When the suite door closed behind me, I set the veil box on the table and pressed both palms against the wood. I breathed until the ocean outside stopped blurring. Then I opened my laptop. The advantage of being the boring daughter was that nobody worried about what I saved. I had every email from the wedding planning account, every invoice I had paid temporarily, every text from my mother asking me to handle another problem because Tessa was overwhelmed, Every spreadsheet where I tracked deposits, reimbursements, guest counts, and vendor deadlines. I had not saved them as weapons. I saved them because accuracy was the only defense I had in a family that edited reality. I found the airline confirmation first. The original itinerary showed my seat assigned beside Aunt Linda in economy, while my parents, Tessa and Preston, were in first class. That part had hurt when I first saw it, but I told myself destination weddings were expensive and I should be grateful they included me. Then I opened the cancellation email buried under promotional junk. The purchaser had voided only one ticket, mine. The credit had been applied to Diane Monroe's seat upgrade fee. Next came the room block changes. My original reservation was a garden view double shared with Aunt Linda. At 6:12 a.m., my mother requested that my name be removed because Jenna may arrive separately and can be placed wherever convenient. A later internal note forwarded accidentally to me by the assistant coordinator said bride's mother indicated Jenna is not a priority guest. Staff adjacent lodging acceptable if needed. I stared at the phrase until it stopped hurting and started becoming useful. There were other pieces too. My mother's signed coordinator authorization with my name typed in. A scanned signature page that did not match mine because it was not mine. Tessa's texts demanding I bring the veil tomorrow if you make it. My father's message saying they needed to discuss what I was telling people. Each item by itself could be excused by someone determined to excuse it. Together they formed a map. Not of one bad day, of a system. At 9:15 someone knocked on my suite door. I looked through the peephole and saw my mother standing there with my father behind her. Tessa was not with them. That told me this was not an apology. Tessa came for comfort. My parents came for control. I opened the door but left the security chain in place. My mother glanced at the chain as if it offended her personally. Really, Jenna? Yes, I said. Really. My father exhaled through his nose. We need to talk like adults. I almost laughed. In our family, talking like adults meant they spoke and I absorbed. Then start with why you canceled my ticket. My mother's face tightened. Your sister was in tears yesterday. The seating was a disaster. Preston's mother was judging everything, and we needed to make a decision quickly. You always say you hate flying. We thought it would be easier if you came later. That is not an answer. It is the truth, my father said. No, I said. It's the version you think sounds least ugly. His eyes sharpened. My mother softened hers. That was their rhythm. He pressed. She pleaded. Together they made a cage and called it concern. Honey, she said, lowering her voice, you know Tessa has always been sensitive. This weekend has to go smoothly. Preston's family is very important. If this wedding falls apart because of a misunderstanding, your sister may never forgive you. There it was. Not we may never forgive ourselves. Not you deserved better. Tessa may never forgive you. They had abandoned me and still found a way to make me the potential offender. I gripped the doorframe and felt something inside me settle into place. I'm not asking Tessa to forgive me for what you did. My father stepped closer, his voice low. You will return the veil in the morning. You will attend the wedding smile and stop discussing private family matters with resort ownership. After the ceremony, we'll talk about your feelings. My feelings, like this was a mood, like forged authorization and cancelled travel, were the same as being grumpy at brunch. I looked at him through the narrow opening and saw, maybe for the first time, how much of his authority depended on me believing he had the right to define reality. No, I said. The word was small. It did not shake the room. It did not carry thunder. But my mother blinked as if I had slapped her. No, my father repeated. No, I said again. I will not smile on command. I will not accept charges I did not approve. I will not pretend I was treated like family when every document says I was treated like staff without pay. My mother's mouth trembled, but not with remorse, with frustration. After everything we've done for you. That old hook tried to catch. The piano lessons I quit because Tessa needed dance costumes. The used car with my name on the insurance but my sister behind the wheel. The birthday dinners where Tessa chose the restaurant because she was picky. I had spent years being told their minimum was a sacrifice, and my sacrifices were expected. What you did for me does not give you ownership over me, I said. My father's face went flat. You're going to regret making enemies of your own family. That sentence should have scared me. It would have once. But through the door chain with the sea behind me and the truth saved in a folder on my desktop, it sounded like a confession. I closed the door without answering. The next morning, my phone held 23 missed calls, 9 voicemails, and 1 message from Preston. His was different. No insults, no family language. Just a clean sentence: we should discuss possible exposure before guests arrive for the ceremony. Exposure. That was what mattered to him. Not harm, not apology, exposure. I forwarded every document to myself, then to a new folder named Saint Aurelia. I printed copies at the business center with Elise's help. She did not ask questions. She simply handed me a cream folder and said, "Mr. Harlow asked me to make sure you had whatever administrative records you requested." Inside were the resort logs, room change, timestamps, coordinator authorization, internal staff, note approval hold, and a written statement from the front desk manager confirming when my family learned I had arrived. At 11, Graham met me in a quiet conference room overlooking the water. He did not sit at the head of the table. He sat across from me, as if this were my meeting. "The ceremony is at 4, he said. "The welcome brunch is in 20 minutes. Your family has requested that I remove the consent, hold, and restore your authorization because several pending upgrades were tied to your name. They still want me responsible." "Yes," he said. "They also asked whether your suite could be reassigned because the bride is distressed." I closed my eyes for 1 second. Then I opened them and felt no surprise at all. "Of course she is." Graham placed a second folder on the table. "I can cancel any authorization connected to you permanently. I can also require the Monroe and Vale families to sign direct responsibility for all charges before the wedding proceeds. That is standard when consent is disputed. And if they refuse, then certain event services stop. Not the wedding itself unless they choose that. But no discretionary additions. No open-ended billing. No charges under your name." I touched the folder. "I don't want revenge that hurts staff or guests." "That is not revenge," he said. "That is refusing liability." I looked out at the ocean where workers were setting white chairs in perfect rows. Somewhere below, my sister was probably being powdered and praised, surrounded by women telling her this was her day. I had once believed love meant making someone's day easier, even if it made your life smaller. Now, I was beginning to understand that some people call you selfish the moment you stop being useful. "I'll go to the brunch," I said. "I'll give her the veil before the ceremony." Graham studied me. "Are you sure?" "Yes," I said, but not quietly. The brunch was held in a glass-walled room above the beach. By the time I arrived, the Monroe and Vale families had already formed their careful circles. My mother saw the cream folder in my hand and lost color. My father saw it next. Tessa sat near the center in a white sundress, laughing too brightly with her bridesmaids. Preston stood behind her chair, one hand on her shoulder like a brand. I walked in carrying the veil box in one hand and the folder in the other. Conversation thinned. Tessa's smile froze. My father started toward me, but Graham entered behind me with Elise and the resort events director. Not close enough to look protective, close enough to look official. And that was when I realized my family had spent my whole life teaching me to be quiet in rooms where they lied. They had never prepared for what would happen when I brought receipts. The brunch room smelled like citrus coffee and expensive flowers. It should have felt soft, but every table had gone sharp when I walked in. Tessa stared at the veil box like I had carried in a bomb. My mother watched the folder. My father watched Graham. Preston watched the exits, which told me more about him than any vow ever could. He was not wondering whether his future wife had hurt her sister. He was calculating where the damage might spread if the truth found a microphone. I set the veil box on the gift table directly in front of Tessa. "Your veil is here," I said. "Clean, undamaged, and on time." Tessa reached for it, but I kept my hand on the lid for one more second, not to punish her, to make her look at me. Her eyes flicked up bright with fury and fear. "I protected what mattered to you," I said quietly, "even after you made sure nobody protected me." My mother moved fast, smiling toward the guests. "Jenna, sweetheart, thank you. Now let's not make a scene before the ceremony." I lifted the cream folder. "This is not a scene, this is a correction." Graham nodded to Elise. She stepped forward and placed 3 copies of a document on the nearest table. The resort events director stood beside her with a tablet, professional and calm. I recognized that calm. It was the kind people use when all the facts are already recorded and nobody needs to be convinced by emotion. My father's confidence changed shape. He still looked angry, but now the anger had edges of uncertainty. Graham addressed both families, not loudly but clearly enough for every guest within 20 feet to hear. Due to a disputed authorization, the Mariners' Crown has removed Miss Jenna Monroe from all financial, logistical, and legal responsibility for the Monroeville wedding weekend. No charges, upgrades, vendor delays, damages, or approvals will be attached to her name. Tessa's bridesmaids stared into their mimosas. Preston's mother pressed 2 fingers against her lips. Charles Vale's face went hard, not at me but at Preston. That was the first real consequence. The lie had crossed from family cruelty into business embarrassment, and suddenly, the people who had been charming over breakfast were listening, like investors on a bad call. My father tried to laugh. "This is unnecessary. Jenna helps with paperwork. That's all this was." "No," I said, opening my folder. "Helping means I agree. This was done without my consent." I placed the first page on the table. It was the coordinator authorization with my name typed beneath my mother's signature. Beside it, I placed a copy of my driver's license signature from the resort check-in form. They did not match. They were not even close. My mother stared at the pages like they had betrayed her by existing. For years, she had relied on private pressure. She had never imagined paper could speak louder than she could. "This signature is not mine," I said. "This authorization would have allowed charges up to $5,000 per incident under my name. I did not sign it. I did not approve it. I was never told about it." Diane Monroe was very good at crying in public. She could make her eyes shine without smearing mascara. She used to do it at school, meetings, church committees, family birthdays, anywhere sympathy could be converted into control. Her eyes filled now. "I was trying to keep things simple," she whispered. "Jenna always handles these things. She knows that." I looked at her and felt the old ache, but it did not lead me back into the cage. "You cancelled my flight." A murmur moved through the room. My father stepped in. "That had nothing to do with this." I put down the airline record. My ticket was voided. The credit was applied to Mom's upgrade fee. Then I put down the room change. My room was cancelled. The note said staff-adjacent lodging was acceptable if I arrived late. My voice stayed steady, almost too steady. "You wanted my name for responsibility, my hands for labor, and my body out of sight." Tessa stood so fast her chair scraped the floor. "You are ruining my wedding." "No," I said. "I am refusing to be used as the floor under it." Her face twisted. "You always do this. You act like some quiet martyr, then wait for the perfect moment to make everyone feel sorry for you." That one almost landed. It found the younger me first, the girl sitting on the edge of family photos, trained to smile small so Tessa could shine. But I had come too far to let her rename the truth at the finish line. "I waited because I hoped you would grow up," I said. "I'm speaking now because you didn't." Preston touched Tessa's elbow, but she shook him off. "She's jealous," she snapped, looking at his family now. "That's what this is. She's always been jealous of me." I could have answered with every birthday, every unpaid bill, every borrowed dollar, every night I stayed up fixing her mistakes while she called me negative. Instead, I reached into the folder and took out the last page. It was her text from the airport, printed cleanly in black ink. "You weren't really needed for the welcome dinner anyway. Bring the veil tomorrow if you make it." Nobody spoke. The sentence did what my pain could not. It made the cruelty simple enough for strangers to understand. Charles Vale turned to Preston. "Did you know about this?" Preston's jaw worked. I knew there were travel complications. "That is not what I asked." The room shifted again. Preston had spent the weekend standing beside the golden daughter, polished and certain. Now he looked like a man realizing the gold was thin, plating over something cheaper. Tessa turned on him. "Do not start with me right now." Graham's events director cleared his throat. "For the wedding to proceed with the requested upgrades, the responsible parties must sign the revised financial authorization directly. No proxy names, no substituted family coordinator. The current balance, and pending additions, will be guaranteed by the bride and groom or their parents." My father looked at the amount on the tablet and went still. My mother leaned close, then whispered something sharp enough that I saw Tessa flinch. The number must have been higher than they expected. That made sense. They had been approving beauty and luxury, with my name standing between them and accountability. Open bars, late-night food, floral additions, cigar lounge, private beach, bonfire, extra photography hours. All the things Tessa deserved as long as someone else could absorb the risk. You can't just spring this on us, my father said. Graham's voice remained calm. It was already on someone. You simply chose the wrong person. I will remember that sentence for the rest of my life. Not because it saved me, but because it named the theft. They had not avoided responsibility. They had assigned it downward. They had built a beautiful weekend on the assumption that I would be too grateful, too ashamed, or too trained to refuse the weight. My father turned to me then. His anger softened into something worse. Jenna, please. This is your sister's wedding. Do you really want to be remembered as the reason it fell apart? I looked around the room. At my mother's tears, at Tessa's trembling mouth, at Preston's calculating silence, at the guests pretending not to stare. The old Jenna would have folded right there. She would have signed something, smiled for pictures, carried the veil, and cried in a bathroom stall where nobody had to adjust their story. But I was not at the airport anymore. I am not the reason, I said. I am the witness. The words settled over the room with a strange quiet. I pushed the folder toward Graham's events director. My authorization is revoked. Permanently. If my family wants this wedding exactly as planned, they can sign for it themselves. My mother let out a small, wounded sound. After all we've done, you would humiliate us over money. No, I said. You humiliated yourselves over control. That was the moment Tessa finally cried. Real tears this time, maybe because the room was no longer hers, maybe because Preston had stepped back half an inch, maybe because she understood that her favorite tool had broken. I did not enjoy it. That surprised me. I had imagined revenge would feel hot and bright. Instead, it felt clean. Sad but clean. Like opening windows in a room where everyone had insisted there was no smoke. Charles Vale signed first, not happily, not kindly. He signed because men like him knew when a liability had to be contained. Preston signed after him, tight-jawed. My father signed last, each stroke of the pen, looking like it cost him blood. My mother did not sign. She stood beside Tessa, one hand on her daughter's shoulder, staring at me as if I had become a stranger. Maybe I had. Maybe a daughter stops being recognizable when she no longer bends. The ceremony happened at 4. I did not stand as a bridesmaid. I watched from the back row in my navy dress, seated beside Aunt Linda, who squeezed my hand once and whispered, "I wondered when you'd finally stop carrying them." That nearly broke me more than everything else. Not because it was cruel, but because it meant someone had seen it. Sometimes, the loneliest part of family pain is believing the witnesses have chosen blindness. Aunt Linda had not been blind. Just quiet. I understood the difference. Tessa wore the veil. It moved beautifully in the wind. I let myself notice that without resentment. The ocean did not care about our family. The flowers did not wilt from shame. The officiant spoke about partnership, honesty, and devotion, while half the front row stared straight ahead with faces carved from stone. Preston said his vows smoothly. Tessa's voice shook, whether from emotion or fury I never knew. Maybe both. People are rarely just one thing, even when they hurt you. At the reception, I stayed for one glass of water and no speeches. My father approached me near the edge of the terrace as the sun went down. For one foolish second, I thought he might apologize. He looked older under the string lights, smaller somehow, without command, filling the space around him. "You made your point," he said. I nodded. "Yes." His mouth tightened. "Family doesn't come back from public betrayal easily." I looked at him for a long moment. "Then you should not have made betrayal public." He had no answer for that. Not one he could say out loud. My mother sent a message after dinner. "I hope you're proud of yourself." Tessa sent nothing. Preston sent one text, asking me to confirm I would not post about the incident online. I did not answer any of them. Silence had once been my hiding place. That night it became my boundary. I packed my bridesmaid dress back into the garment bag and left it at the front desk with a note for Tessa. Returned unused. It was petty maybe, but it was honest. The next morning, Graham had a car take me to the airstrip. He was already there, reading emails in the same navy jacket, as if rescuing abandoned daughters from commercial terminals was simply one item between property inspections. I thanked him before boarding. The words felt too small. He looked out toward the runway. "You arrived because you chose not to lie for them." "I arrived because you had a jet," I said. That made him smile. The the jet helped. On the flight home, I did not feel triumphant. I felt tired, deeply spiritually tired. But beneath it there was a quiet space where dread used to live. My phone buzzed several times before we reached North Carolina. I turned it face down. For the first time, I did not need to read every message to know who I was. Their version of me had required constant maintenance. Mine did not. 2 weeks later, an invoice arrived at my apartment by mistake, forwarded from the resort system, before my name was fully removed from the event file. The balance had been paid by Charles Vale. Attached was a corrected note from the Mariner's Crown confirming I had no responsibility for any wedding costs or authorizations. I printed it and placed it in the same folder with the airline record and Tessa's text. Not because I planned to use it again. Because evidence matters. Even after the trial, inside your own heart is over. My parents called for months. Sometimes angry, sometimes soft, sometimes saying Tessa was devastated, sometimes saying I had embarrassed them beyond repair. They never said, "We left you." They never said, "We forged your consent." They never said, "We are sorry." Eventually, I stopped waiting for words they did not have the courage to form. I changed my number before Thanksgiving and sent one email with no drama, no accusations, no open door disguised as politeness. It said, "I am stepping away from this family system. Do not contact me unless you are ready to acknowledge what happened honestly and without blaming me for naming it." They did not respond honestly, so I stayed away. Healing did not look like a new family appearing overnight. It looked like Sunday mornings without dread. It looked like buying flowers for my own kitchen without wondering whether that money should be saved for someone else's emergency. It looked like Mara coming over with takeout and saying, "You know you're allowed to be boring and happy, right?" It looked like me laughing, because boring and happy sounded like paradise. A year later, I flew again through Charlotte. Same airport, same terminal, different gate. I stood near the windows and watched a plane pull away from the jet bridge. For a moment, my body remembered everything before my mind did. The canceled ticket, the veil box, my mother's text, my father's almost wave. Then the memory passed through me and kept going. It no longer owned the room. I used to believe being left behind proved I was unwanted. Now I know some people leave you behind because they cannot take you anywhere they plan to lie. They need you absent, quiet, grateful, and available. They need you close enough to use and far enough not to count. But the moment you stop accepting that distance, the whole arrangement starts to collapse. Family is not first-class seats and matching photos. It is not a word people get to use while assigning you the bill. It is not tradition when only one person sacrifices. It is not loyalty when silence is demanded as proof. Real family does not abandon you at the gate and then call you dramatic for finding another way to arrive. I still have the folder. I still have the corrected resort letter. I still remember the sound of that gate door closing, but I also remember the sound of my own voice saying no through a chained hotel door. I remember walking into that brunch with the veil in one hand and the truth in the other. I remember learning that being calm does not mean being weak. They flew first class to my sister's wedding without me. So I arrived by private jet with the man who owned the resort. And this time, when the doors opened, I walked in under my own name,